Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Just Two Dads. I'm Brian Altunian, co-host with Sean Francis. And today's episode of Just Two Dads, we are going to be talking about medication, vaccination, all of the nations that stir some controversy. And I'm looking forward to a lively conversation here on Just Two Dads. Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Brian Altunian. I'm a co-host, co-creator, co-founder. I don't know what I'm co with this guy here, Sean Francis. Want to welcome you all if you're watching us on Facebook Live. And I know Joe Quinones, my daughter Jordan. Hi, babe. Good to see you. Welcoming you from Facebook Live. I just try to do an Instagram Live to promote this, and then I don't know what I'm doing in social media, folks. So just to be real, I have no idea what I'm doing, but really appreciate you joining us. We're gonna have a lively discussion today. Hope you'll contribute and give us your thoughts. If you're catching us on Facebook Live, hit us up in the comments and let us know give us some feedback, some questions, some things to discuss. Also, if you're not catching us live, but you're catching us on our YouTube channel, we appreciate that. Hopefully the information you'll find compelling. Feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, please. Share it. Let everybody know. Let everybody know you're finding some decent content here. And for everybody listening on podcasts, Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever podcast outlets can be found, thank you for listening in. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you'll share some of these episodes with folks that you know. There's a lot of stuff that's happening. By the way, we are moving to Wednesdays on WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So for everybody, our family listening to us on WSTX AM radio, great to see you, or great to be speaking to you, I guess. Before we get started, I just want to call out a couple things really. First of all, just for everybody to know, and I'm sorry to do this, Sean, I'm just jumping in here, but we end our show and we always forget. And honestly, it's a true forget. Like, I'm going to put it and post it. Like, we forget to acknowledge our producer, Sean Hall, in Hawaii. So Sean Hall is responsible for getting our links out there and making sure that our audiences, all of our graphics have to look at the field and everything. And today's Sean and his wife Kowie's 14th year anniversary. So I want to wish Sean a happy anniversary, first of all, and tell him how grateful we are for his contributions to us on a regular basis and inspiration as well. So happy anniversary. Also, a little shout out to my boy Blake, turned 14 yesterday, and last night we got to take in a Dodger game playing the rivals, the San Francisco Giants, and the Dodgers had a walk-off home run at the end of the bottom of the ninth inning, which was an exciting way to end the evening. So happy birthday, buddy! I'll tell you I love you. Jordan, my daughter, is always on the show. This is a family-oriented show, right? There's a lot of family stuff here. So anyways, excited to be talking about the subject matter that we're going to cover. And as always, it intends to be, it's going to be a bit lively because I think Sean and I may come at this from the same perspective, but different angles, if that makes sense. So without further ado, I just want to welcome you and say hello and greet you, my good friend, Sean Francis, my colleague, my business partner, my partner in Thrive. How are you today, my friend? Yeah, no, I know. That was the longest intro in the history of the show, right? So, all right.
That's okay. It was the longest intro, and it was still, and as usual, full of value. It's great to be here as always. It's kind of interesting. I don't know why we haven't tackled this topic before. I think we have in snippets, at least a portion of it. And it is a very, very personal one. So we want to let everyone know that, whenever we give experiences here a little bit more so than we might advice. Okay. So I think that's something that even when someone does give advice, it should be given from an experience standpoint, which gives you some kind of qualification. But each human being has already met the qualification just by way of their birth to be respected and to not be judged. So we're not here to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do, but just speak to our own experiences. And as you mentioned, there's some things that we share, some we might differ on, and some of yours I'm curious about as it relates to the following subject, which is medications and vaccinations, to medicate and or vaccinate or to not to. Generally speaking, That is the question, and it carries a whole lot of weight. But in the age of COVID, that weight grows tremendously. I'll start by sharing that. Elijah, was 15 years old. Our son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, and for years we avoided medication. It wasn't even really a big conversation to have because the challenges that we were facing didn't justify any kind of prescriptions or being medicated. It wasn't even presented to us, and we were fine with that because our preference would be that would always be a last resort for us. And in the last, I think it's probably been about maybe a year, some of that has changed just because we've had challenges as it relates to nutrition. So in other words, as far as his diet goes and things like that, and his sleep, we've carefully chosen what we are willing to try and what we're not open to. And I will say that we've gingerly accepted, some medication for anxiety, and that will help with sleep and things of that sort. And that also led to the matter with regard to whether or not he would get vaccinated as far as COVID goes. And we chose to do that, but we actually chose that in response. It was initiated by him because he actually wanted to get the vaccine. He associated the vaccine with going to school. And since then, there's just one medication, that we're dealing with. I like to avoid them altogether. And so the other thing that we have, which prevented us from judging anybody, in addition to our, desire to not hold anyone in judgment, is the fact that the challenges that we had, as I mentioned earlier, didn't call for that. We had the luxury of saying that we're not going to deal with any medication. There are people who have situations and behaviors and diagnoses and things of that sort where it's not as easy to say that that's just not going to take place. And then now that I think about it, like when the fall comes, who's going to be sending their child to school without having them vaccinated? They're not required to do so. So it's a very personal choice. And again, like I said, I hope that a lot of people will chime in and let us know where they stand.
Yeah, well, I think, it's interesting because we've been talking about this, I think in general, everybody's been talking about the vaccinations. We can't help it. It's all over the news, and, who should do it, who doesn't do it. You have to show proof of vaccination to do certain activities. So, but I think that most of the time when it comes to just traditional medication and vaccination for any of us, how our bodies respond to that outside stimulus, it's different. It's different for everybody, right? I know people who get the flu vaccine and immediately get the flu, right? I know people who don't take the annual flu vaccine and they never get sick. And so, I think my opinion is, I think that our bodies respond similar to how allergies are done. I think we're allergic to certain elements within medications and vaccinations and whatnot, and that's why our bodies, react the way they react, right? So to some way, people are resistant. I think back when I was younger, I think I'm allergic to penicillin. Like, could you imagine being allergic to penicillin? So, but that happens, right? But penicillin on a grand scale, penicillin was used to offset, disease and infections. And yet for my body, I can't take penicillin. So, I think that people respond to vaccines differently. And maybe the reaction is similar to how people are allergic to certain things. But just going back, I never get the flu vaccine. Somebody called me out on this the other day, friendly, over a phone call. We're talking about it. And like, I don't get the flu vaccine. I don't do it because I just never want, you have to, basically you're inserting an element of the illness into your body so you can build up antibodies, you can build up an immunity against the flu. And I had somebody I had worked for a CEO who insisted that everybody get the flu vaccine every year, insisted on it.
Really?
Yeah. Everybody. And I will tell you, I never did it.
Can anybody legally do that?
No. He couldn't force us to. He just made a big deal about it, right? And by the way, I didn't care. I wasn't going to be shamed into doing it. I was very anti just general flu vaccines. But I got the vaccine for COVID. But here's the thing why. Somebody said, There's so much that we can talk about when it comes to this subject matter. But everybody in my company at the time who got the flu vaccine all got sick. It was just the way, because their bodies still had to process that stuff that was being inserted into the body, right? So you still can, by the way, a vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting sick, right? That's kind of the thing. It's not intended to like be a brick wall that stops it. What it intends to do is to help your body build up some natural immunity so that you can fight it. So that if you get sick, your response isn't so drastic that you end up in the hospital or die, because people die from the flu. People are hospitalized for the flu. If you get the flu vaccine, theoretically, depending on how your body operates, your body builds up immunity and it just minimizes the impact, which, by the way, has been the recurring conversation on those that are trying to get people to do the COVID vaccinations. Not going to stop you, because some I hate to use the term anti-vaxxer, but people who are anti the COVID vaccine are saying, well, there's no guarantee you're not going to get it. Yeah, but it was never advertised as a guarantee that you're not going to get it. The advertising is you may still get it, but you won't die from it. I mean, well, people are getting COVID and not dying from it anyways. Yeah, I can look at individual cases and say that that's happening, but I can just as easily look at individual cases and saying, but this person did die of it, and this person didn't have any issues and then died of COVID, right? So, so the point is, vaccinations are intended to help the body build up its natural immune system. The challenge that we're having now, and we're going to have, and I know people have an opinion about Bill Gates, good and bad, and some people think he's evil. The reality is we're going to have further pandemics. We're going to have global epidemics because the illnesses they're mutating and growing and developing stronger strains as well. And so while a vaccine may help to minimize or mitigate some of the downside of this current illness, it may not prevent future illnesses from having an impact. The idea is get the vaccine to keep you out of the hospital and keep you from dying. Now, that's just sort of the general, the efficacy of vaccinations is supposed to build up your immune system so that your body naturally can fight it. That's on the vaccine side. And I would say medications probably along the same lines, right? How can you take certain medications that will help to mitigate some of the downside or minimize some of the impact so that you can actually function efficiently? We definitely want to talk about medications. They're two separate things, right? Vaccinations just happen to be in the news right now because it's a global pandemic. It's something that, and by the way, highly transmissible, right? ADHD is not contagious, right? You can't share ADHD, in air in a crowded room, right? And so an illness and a vaccination for something that's highly contagious, they're completely separate things. So vaccination just happens to be in the news. I think that our consideration for whether or not, and again, sorry for the long ramble, our consideration for whether or not we vaccinate ourselves or our children, that is a very personal issue. If you're thinking about how does this impact me and my child, I'm going to get comments about it and I'm okay with that. I got vaccinated partially, not for my benefit, honestly, really not for my benefit, but my children grew up with allergies and asthma. And so a compromised immune system already when it comes to allergies and asthma. I'm concerned. I want to make sure that, my kids are taken care of. Not only that, but I have elderly parents who are, near the end of their lives. And if I want to go see them and visit them before they pass, I'm not going to be the reason they pass. Like, I'm not going to be the reason that they get sick and die. I want to be able to see them. So for me to take the vaccinations, it was so that I can actually see other people and do the things that I want to do and not have the possibility of me passing it on to somebody else exists. So that's my personal thing. We could talk about medication, but just my personal thing about vaccinations. And again, I know you have to, I want you to weigh in on what your position is on vaccination, because your situation with Elijah, there's other issues, right? How does your child process the getting of the vaccination? If you want to share that story a little bit. Right. Fascinating.
And I will. And so it's funny because I hadn't thought either way about, because I wasn't going anywhere and I thought I was doing a pretty good job. I thought we're all doing a pretty good job of keeping ourselves out of harm's way. So I hadn't thought too much about the vaccine. I know some people are like, I'm getting that as soon as it comes out, because other people are like, no, it's going to take your brain and suck it right out, or whatever people thought. I just hadn't thought of it either way. And then when he started asking, I was like, And then, and my was related to whether or not he would get it, and then myself as well. And eventually, you know, we as a family each decided to go ahead and do that and go through the process. And for him, you know, he started asking, and I think I told the story in the last episode, but he started asking. There was a drive-through at the local college. We went through a real challenge with that, where he didn't want them to. He wanted to do it, but he just really couldn't, as they would get close. You know, and I started to realize kind of what it meant to him. And we weren't indoctrinating and putting anything in front of him, trying to tell him that he should get it. But he built the association between getting it and going back to school. And he was someone that enjoys being in school, but wasn't crazy about going to school, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But after distance learning, before they talked about the vaccine, he would just beg, please, can we go back to school? And it was his first year of high school too. And so, you know, eventually they tried to sneak up and give the injection really, really quick. And he turned right away and knocked the needle out of the nurse's hand, and the syringe was still full. And so, because I thought, oh my gosh, was it done? And the response was no. You know, it's still in the syringe, so we didn't get it. I was like, and he was familiar enough with the process now to know that there's a sticker that you get with your card saying that it's done. So he's like, where's my sticker? Where's my sticker?
Yeah.
He's like, I did it. And he's looking for a high five. And at that point, I'm at a point now where I can tell that portion of the story without getting emotional.
Took
quite a while though, because it meant so much to him. And it wasn't something that you told him he should do. It was something that he wanted on his own, which brought up a whole another conversation where I'm thinking of kids who are limited in their ability to express themselves verbally, as well as those that are nonverbal altogether. Just in terms of the voice of one on the spectrum, the voice on one who is challenged and has a limitation as to how loud their voice gets. And it just reminded me that we need to try harder to listen and hear, you know? So it's very disappointed because he's just like, you know, I did it. And it's like, no, you knocked it out. It wasn't in there. He's like, no. And he was real upset. So we figured a hospital was a better setting. We got to that appointment late. Excuse me. So that didn't get done. He had a meltdown about that. Then when he finally came back, he didn't just do it. He sat there and looked at it, watched the injection take place and everything, didn't want any help. And that was a big deal and a big step, you know? And, you know, for us, that was huge. And so I was going to ask you, because either it wasn't as big a conversation back when Jordan was Elijah's age, or I just didn't know because I wasn't a parent at the time. So my ask to you is, when it came to medication and things like that, what is the stance that you guys took with Jordan at that time?
Well, it's interesting because a few things. First of all, I may have mentioned this in the past, but when Jordan's mom was pregnant with Jordan, she developed a pregnancy rash, which is very rare. Right, a pregnancy rash, which goes from like from mid belly to like upper thigh, and
you
just
mentioned that,
solid. Like she literally had to go and sit in a bath of ice because you couldn't put medication on in her final trimester. You can't put medication on, anti-itch cream or anything, because it goes in through the skin and affects the baby. So she couldn't be treated for it. She couldn't take a pill for it. She had to, anybody who's had allergies and eczema and itching and anything, like the idea of like not being able to get any kind of and you kind of resolve it. Just so that was a struggle, right? And then when it came time to deliver, she was going to go and well, let me just say this: while we were in the sort of the delivery room, that wasn't the delivery, it's the pre-delivery room. It's not the waiting room, but
the green room for the hospital.
The what's that?
The green room for the hospital.
Yes, exactly, before the show, right?
Backstage.
Jordan's heart rate crashed for a moment. They have heart monitors on the baby and heart monitors on the mom, and and it was kind of crazy because where she was born was at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, and it's a massive hospital, but it's also a bit of a teaching hospital. There's elements there, so there were interns that it was one of those things where it was quiet, the room was a little bit dark, and and all of a sudden, like, the door burst open and like 25 people moved into a room. By the way, a room that's big enough to comfortably hold 4. right? Like there's a ton of people are like, and I'm sitting there going like, what happened? Because we didn't get any notification. We didn't know it. Like it, and so like we didn't know anything. Like what are y'all doing here? And they're like, baby mom, we're just checking on the baby, blah blah blah. And then people are coming in. They're like, oh, we heard about the pregnancy rash. We've never seen it in person. We want to see what it's like. We want to see what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so she's like, well, I mean, I guess if the entire hospital staff is going to come here and stare at my belly and my crotch, I guess I'm not sure what to do at this point, right? Just there it is. Yeah. So had to have an emergency C-section, right? So we had an emergency C-section, and by the way, Jordan was born; it was all beautiful. So we had that incident when she was pregnant, and then in the old days when you and I were children, I think there were like 4 vaccinations or maybe 5, yes. Right?
Mm-hmm. Tops.
Right, mumps and rubella and chicken pox and just maybe 5 or 6. Now, if you actually look at the number of injections a child gets from the time they're born until the time they're about a teenager, it's like 54 injections. Mm-hmm. Some are like 1, 2, 3, 4 shots.
And the measles, mumps, rubella alone is the issue because those 3 are given all at one time.
Right.
Unless you request for them to be broken up.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, Jordan started with, the schedule of these vaccinations. And and I didn't notice it. My mother was the first I'd give her credit. She was the first to notice it. What appeared to be Jordan's development was a little bit slow, and we should just have things checked out. And it was in the middle of vaccination, time. And so then we start reading everything, and there's a big anti-vax, perspective when it comes to things like autism and developmental delays and those type of things tied to vaccination. So honestly, we didn't really know what it was. So we just stopped all vaccinations at that point. We just like, no more vaccinations. Let's just like eliminate the extraneous outside, stimulus and let's just see what can happen. And she also had allergies. And a lot of times, we have, we talk about Arizona, Susanna Lavelle's daughter, who's on the autism spectrum as well, who has allergies and ADHD, all the A things. A lot of our children who have developed these issues, whether it's ADHD or autism, also there are allergies and asthma and other things that generally come with it. They seem to be like come hand in hand. And so we had a nutritionist who told Jordan's mom, listen, if you start to eliminate those things that you're traditionally allergic to, cheese, wheat, that kind of thing, you can look at treating allergies and this kind of thing with nutrition and diet. And so we were very anti-vaccination at that point when it came to Jordan, because between the pregnancy rash and as a long answer to your question, buddy, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Pregnancy rash and the vaccinations at the time, we were trying to figure out a causal connection, not a coincidental connection, but a causal. Is there something that could have caused it? And I know a lot of parents who deal with who have children who have special needs issues are trying to find that time. Was there a thing that happened where and we had Joey Martins who made a comment here. We had Joey on who, noticed something happen with his daughter immediately after getting a vaccination shot, or within a few hours. And so a lot of parents will look at that and go, well, that maybe was the cause, that maybe that happened and then this happened, so this has to be the cause. And I don't know if that's actually true, or if it's just somewhat coincidental in the development process. But
right.
From that point on, and I'll just finish this by saying this: we did not over-vaccinate Gabby, Jordan's sister, who's about almost 3 years younger, 2.5 years younger. We gave her the minimal amount of vaccines necessary to be able to attend school and all that stuff. And same with Blake. And by the way, all 3 of my kids have, asthma as children, as asthma and allergies and, and eczema, because it's just a hereditary thing. They thank me for it on a regular basis. Hey, Dad, thanks for giving me, asthma. But the reality is, we try to eliminate any of those things that could be a factor and put them on a diet that would support, boost immunity and boost their physical health, while also eliminating as many of the vaccinations as possible. That being said, I think both Jordan and Gabby are both vaccinated, and we actually are considering vaccinating Blake for COVID. And I know it sounds hypocritical, but it's different, right? There's a difference between all these vaccinations, that we give our children when they're younger, are to prevent the spread of something that could be contagious, and that's something that could impact other people. That's why mumps and rubella and measles, all that stuff, that's something that was highly contagious. With COVID being highly contagious, especially the new Delta variant that people are talking about, because my children have asthma and have weak lungs, I don't want him to get sick. I don't want my kids to get sick, and I don't want them to pass it around to other people. And if it's not contained to a small area, it's global. So we've rationalized giving them the vaccination for COVID. I don't think we'll add other vaccinations to the mix. I don't think they all have gone to non-Western doctors for treatment. And we are very happy with how their doctors have prescribed, the kinds of, I want to call them, Eastern medications, along with Western medications if necessary, but Eastern medications, tinctures, and, things that keep them on a good, steady health basis. Right. Because over time, sometimes we outgrow our allergies. And so I had a cup of coffee just before we started this, so I feel like I'm rambling today. I'm like on a roll, if that's all right. I'm just being real, but that's not what's going on.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right. I wouldn't say that you're on a ramble. But this is, usually people chime in here and there. This is one of those shows where, and I apologize, wish we had people know more about it, I guess, as far as, live interaction, but make sure that wherever you're seeing this, because I don't think we're going to have enough time to cover all the different angles of this, especially because we're curious as to what other people feel. I say that getting older is a superpower, and the superpower that I think I'm developing with age is increasing a level of compassion. It's nowhere where I'd like it to be, but being able to slip other people's shoes on my feet a little easier. So even if I have a jerk reaction to myself, which is like, why would anybody do that? Immediately, I still will tend to go, I wonder why anyone would do that. So with that in mind, I'm just really curious as to the different positions that people have. And the other thing is to have a toddler with any kind of condition, diagnosis, or delay in this day and age is not the same thing as it was in 2005 or 2006, and especially not what it was in the 90s for you. So it's always interesting to see where people stand, because
and science evolves, right? So science gets better, and so it does change, right? It does change.
Yeah, completely. And it's there's a lot of information out there, which means that, on one hand today, ignorance is a choice. I'm the one that I've heard somebody say that, and like, yeah, that's right. Ignorance is a choice because there's so much information out there. But you know what? There's more information than there are filters. So ignorance is a choice to an extent, right? How much of a choice ignorant is only dependent upon how many questions you ask and the quality of those questions. Because I saw a post just yesterday where this guy, I'm guessing he must have been at some kind of testing site or something, and he's got his camera on, as if you can see from my angle, for those of you that are looking, and he says, do you know what such and such and such is? Some ingredient. And he holds it up, takes the form holds it up to the camera, says, you know what such and such and such is? Do you know what that is? Well, it causes brain deterioration, blah, 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 all these different things that it does. And on the package that he had, there were instructions to swab. And I'm suspecting it was a COVID test, which, those aren't all over the places they were when everything first hit. But the person that posted it put, don't get tested. And I just thought,
interesting.
That's very general. And the way the guy spoke, he sounded like an authority. He sounded very convincing. So I'm wondering if people will see that, and some people just, and here's the other thing too. The one thing that I will say that isn't just a matter of opinion, is just about right and wrong. If you choose not to get tested, you choose not to get vaccinated because that is your right and that is the way you feel, what then comes with that is a responsibility to make sure that you do everything you can to not put other people in harm's way. Where there are people that don't necessarily do that, and that shouldn't be controversial, but there may be people that watching or listening now that'll say, I can go where I want to go, I'm an American. Like, well, yeah, but there's things that go along with that.
Right. A lot of things that are being, well, I would say over the last 4 or 5 years, we've grown highly polarized in this country, and usually along political lines. And so oh God, I saw a great post by Gary V the other day, by the way, Gary Vaynerchuk, which applies to what I'm about to say here, because here's the thing.
Oh,
Most
I saw
people,
that.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
Most
go ahead,
people
yeah.
live in the, like, I'm right, so you must be wrong. Not I'm right and you could also be right, right? Or I believe in this and it's okay for you to believe in something different, right? He's like, it's either or. It's not. The world is not built on, is not made of either or. That's a limited scarcity mindset, right? The only way that I win is if you lose. That's not the way it is. I can win and you can win as well. Here's the great thing about the world. We can both win. And we can both win with different opinions. It's okay. It's not this or that. It's, he said, like, if you put the letters M and E, around or, it's more, right? It's not either or, it's more.
Right.
I love that idea. And so a lot of folks are taking this extreme position. Well, if I'm a Republican, then Democrats are wrong. I'm a Democrat, Republicans are wrong. And by the way, all of this conversation around medication and vaccination, it's a highly personal choice. Right? It's how you, first of all, how you believe your body's going to react to getting a vaccination. It's how it's the reasons why, you would consider getting the vaccination. You take all that stuff into consideration. If people are good and they want to stay home and they're not going to interact with anybody else and they don't want to get a vaccination, right? That's fine. That doesn't have to be either or, right? If people want to go out in public and do things and they don't want to wear a mask, like, I understand it. It makes sense. Like, if you don't want to do it, I don't want to run in the gym with a mask on. I have a hard enough time breathing as it is. Clearly, I don't go to the gym very often. But when I go, right, last thing I want to do is I want to wear a mask, right? But here's the thing: is like we've gotten to the point where, like, you're pushing people to get a vaccination, so you're wrong, or don't tell me what to do. It's my right. I can do this. Whatever. However, this is not a U.S. situation or U.S. only situation. It's a global pandemic. It's not just affecting us in the United States. So it's not just Republican versus Democrat in the United States. This is Canada. It's Israel. It's New Zealand. It's China. It's all of these, it's human everywhere, right? It's universal. So the reality is it shouldn't be a political discussion. It should be what do we do to protect the general public? And how can we get in front of this thing so that we're not losing people unnecessarily? And the last thing we want to do is fill the airwaves, and that means web and every kind of every kind of areas with purposeful misinformation. Those people who go online and say you should not get vaccinated when they've gotten vaccinated, right?
I was just going to say that. Yeah, completely. Right? Yeah.
Here's the reasons why. Here's all the scientific reasons why you should not get vaccinated. But I got vaccinated. Oh, but I'm not going to tell you that. But I got the vaccine, but you shouldn't do it because God dang, tyranny, and we shouldn't have the government control our lives and get into our space, right? It should be your choice. By the way, you should also, you should also not allowed to, have an abortion. It's a whole different conversation. It was the bottom line is don't
be a hypocrite is what you're saying. Yes,
it's highly personal decisions, and it's okay if you have a feeling about it. I know for me, I read a lot of information. I process a lot of information, and I think, how is this going to impact my children, my family, my life, my world, the world that I'm in, how I interact with people, and make the right decision. And it was Sean saying, quite honestly, the answer is a hybrid between both Eastern and Western medicine. And I agree. Our bodies weren't intended to take in the kinds of highly scientific, lab-produced medications that we do now. But the bodies also have never had the kind of exposure to, carcinogens and other airborne diseases and illnesses that could kill us. So as we evolve and as our world evolves, science is just trying to provide us with the support. The key is, can you get the support that allows your body to naturally fight the issue that you're dealing with? And now if it's okay, like that's vaccine side, that allows us to sort of transition to just the general medication. Some people feel that our children who struggle with ADHD issues and, any kind of attention deficit issue or cognitive processing issue, that it could be solved by medication, strictly medication, right? And truly Western medicine is designed to be a Band-Aid, to be a fix and fix the symptoms. And so there's a lot of thought
and to make money.
Well, 100%, right? I mean, obviously, it's one of the most powerful lobbying groups in the United States and beyond, but also one of the biggest money makers, and so for sure, 100% make money.
Right.
And so there's so many schools of thought on just general medication, and so taking that information into consideration, right? These companies are making money; they're trying to peddle medication. You deal with a child who has some processing issues, who goes into a public place like a restaurant or anything and has a complete meltdown. And it's not just once, it's several times, because the stimulus is, you can't control how they're processing the stimulus. How do you as a parent deal with that and have a, I don't call it quote unquote normal life, right? And so, because this question, and I'm doing a lot of talking, but Sean, really this question is on you, is sort of how do we make that decision? Like, do we, because that's obviously very personal too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you medicate your children to allow them to be mainstreamed in certain activities and certain things, right? Do you medicate your children to get them in school? Do you medicate your children to go out in public? Do you medicate? That's, again, it's a whole, even before the pandemic, this has been an ongoing discussion point. What are your thoughts on that piece of it as I drink more coffee?
Well, and scare the cup of coffee.
By the way, caffeine, total medication to, change my body. Yeah.
Right.
My body composition at the moment.
I think there's something to be said for just the extreme approaches we take to anything. Going back to the comment you made about Gary Vaynerchuk's perspective, which is, here's my view. People get so into their own shoes and they're tied so tight, and you're just like, this is how I feel and I am right. And if you don't agree with me, you're wrong. That what happens is people get extreme about whatever side of the fence they sit on when it comes to politics, medication, religion, anything at all. And if we would, if we could be a little more childlike and less childish, we would go a long way. Ask more questions, make less statements. Yeah. Well, why do you honestly feel that way? Because if you care too, people can tell that you're asking for the reason, as opposed to, why do you feel that way? You can really tell. And so what that does is, at least in my experience, is it prevents the extreme, right? Because extremes go both ways and are never good. Because you have people that are extreme when it comes to an individual who has a title next to their name, whether it's doctor, lawyer, mayor, whoever. And the thought process can be that person has that title, so they just kind of know everything. The best doctor for one's body is the owner of that body, right? Which is you.
Absolutely.
But when you go to a doctor, you're not just going for help. You don't just go to seek their input. You go to form a partnership. Right. So you form a partnership where you work together and you become informed as to what things do. And it's okay to question that doctor. At the same time, you don't, with no years of experience, you don't compare Google to science.
Right.
People like it's a search engine. It's not, an information,
not a research engine.
Not a research engine. Right. You don't right. Like I saw a meme the other day where a guy's sitting at the kitchen table looking back at his wife and he goes, "Hey, I found something that 10 years of science and study just happened to miss." It goes both ways, and I think that people, when people get extreme with either one, the truth gets missed in the middle. That's just, my take.
Yeah, no, I listen, I totally agree. And, it's funny because, this concept of, again, my opinion versus your opinion is what you were saying about your relationship with your doctor. Again, that's a highly evolved thought process about our modern medicine, right? That's not what it's been though. We've been teaching our folks to, you have a problem, go see the doctor and they'll give you something to fix it, as if it's a mechanic. We've been treating our doctors in the medical practice as if they were mechanics working on our car. I got a pinging sound. What is it? I don't know. And by the way, I will tell you that that doctors are not even as good at diagnosing an issue as mechanics are on your car. Mechanics like, oh, is it a ping, ping, ping sound or is it a grr, grr, grr sound, right? And then they can figure it out. Doctors work from the position of, well, let's try to eliminate what it's not. And then, so it's not ping, 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 and it's not grr, grr, grr. So, okay, so it's not those three things. Let's try to figure out what this is. If we could change our philosophy around how we utilize doctors and how we and get our doctors who are in tune with our body, what works, what doesn't work, and think about this as a partnership. Again, our medical billing practice doesn't allow for this. So the doctors, the way they're trained to treat people, is not necessarily made to manifest this. But really, and by the way, this is Eastern philosophy to some degree. It really is what has to happen, because you and I are very close to the same age. We come from very different backgrounds and very different locations to begin with. So how you and I process the same medication, of course, it's not going to be exactly the same. They don't create medication to solve everybody's problem. They develop and they create medication to solve on a bell curve the majority of people, because they have a majority of symptoms that this thing can go and attack. But those outliers, and what we're finding is the more sophisticated we're getting, that outlier on the either end of the bell curve is getting bigger and bigger, because people are coming up with, there's unique challenges, unique situations. So for our medications to try to go after a broad spectrum of symptoms is the wrong way to look at this. Doc, I've got a sneeze. Can you give me a pill? Doc, I've got this itch here. Can you give me a pill? Can you give me a shot? Can you give me something?
That happens. Two things I'll say at that point. I never forget. I remember probably like 20 years ago, I went to a doctor for a checkup. I go annually, and if you change your insurance, maybe that doctor isn't available, whatever. That's why there's something to be said for having some kind of, if not wealth, just choices, right? Which is a whole nother conversation that we can have, so that you can be like, that guy there, I want him on my team. I like him. So I'm going to talk about team in a minute. But this was a doctor that I went to see once because I think I was in between plans or something like that. And the doctor I would ordinarily see wasn't available. And I went to see this doctor, and I'm in a waiting room, and I'm in the examination room, actually. Yeah. And the walls between the rooms were like paper thin. And so he's talking to the patient he's seen before me. He's like, so what's going on? They tell him, and he goes, well, what do you want me to prescribe? I'm like, what do you mean? Who's the doctor here? He literally asked them that, and I think the response was kind of like, well, I saw a commercial for so-and-so, and then does that work? Well, we can try that. And I was like, whoa. I'm about to be out like an afro and leave this office. That's crazy. That you got to be kidding me. But the other thing I was going to say about team is that, you hear about certain entertainers or athletes and members of their team, whether it's their agent or their trainer or their handler or whoever. Even people in those high-end, quite type of situations forget that they have a team around there to work with you. Everyone should have a team regardless of what station you're at in life. So there's people that know more about you when it comes to medicine. You want a good doctor on your team, right? And this is just, again, this is my experience and not advice. I just think it's common sense. Yeah. You should have a good doctor on your team, someone that you trust in their expertise and their care for you and the manner in which they communicate, right? You should have a good realtor on your team, right? Someone, again, that has expertise and who you trust in terms of communication. The same should be true of an attorney and a financial advisor. Now, those last two, you think that associates with wealthy people. Now, you might not use, one or the other until a situation calls for it. But the areas that matter most in the life, when it comes to your faith, your family, your fitness, and your finance, you should have people that specialize in those things and understand that they're not people that you work with and just, do everything they say regardless of what it is. They're people that you trust. You work together with them for them to make the best recommendation based on their experience, and then gauge your comfort level and decide to take it or not and go from there. And if we took that approach with everything, we'd be in a little bit of a different place on the medical side, I think, when it comes to both medications and vaccines.
Well, if you think about it, and it's an interesting point, and actually something I think we're probably end up talking about again, and we should, is, if you think about the areas that you want to evolve, or you want to grow, or you want to have you want to add some value. Is it interesting how certain spiritual leaders, and first of all, certain spiritual leaders on the religious side, but just spiritual leaders in general, we're inspired by different people. Each one of us similarly is inspired by a different person, the way they speak, what they say. And a lot of times we spend I'm going to speak for myself and a lot of people that I know. I'm in a circle of fairly evolved people who spend a lot of time on personal development. And isn't it interesting how we all like listen to a podcast every day, or we seek out, we see a post by one of our mentors or somebody who we follow. Again, we just mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk. We talk about Ed Milet a lot here, and that we're inspired. Goggins, Tony Robbins. It doesn't really matter who it is, right? Some of us are inspired, and so we seek out that spiritual growth every day. But we don't do the same thing with our medical health, or we don't do the same thing with. So if you think about all the areas of your life that you'd like to improve on, right? Your physical health, you should have a trainer on your team, right? Your financial health, you should have a financial advisor on your team. It just kind of goes along with that, right? Your family health, you should have somebody that you can talk to about your family, family issues, family matters, family conversations. That should be part of your team. Every one of those areas that you want to have some constant growth and evolution. All of those areas fit what we call it faith, right? So you have whether it's a spiritual person, whether it's your clergy or a spiritual advisor or a mentor that you can get that inspiration from. All of faith, family, fitness, finances. What is the other one we talk about? All of those areas. If you look for a leader in each one of those areas, and fun, right? Yeah. That's another one. A lot of times it's our partner, right? It's our partner in our relationship, or a close friend, or somebody that like, hey, I need to get out and clear my head and go do something fun. What are we going to go do, right? Let's go do something. Hey, let's get in the car. Let's go see some live music. Let's go do something cool together today, right? Let's go. All of those areas of your life that you want to have improvement, you should have a leader in those areas. And if you look at them as truly not just somebody that you follow or listen to, but somebody that you engage with, and that has a sense of who you are too, you're going to have some evolution, right? You're going to have some growth. If you look at your doctors as a partner in that, if I found a doctor that I was enlightened by and educated by and enlivened by as much as I love listening to Ed Milet and Ed Milet's podcast and everything Ed Milet posts, that's the kind of person I would love to have managing my health or helping me manage my health. Right. There is a doctor on TikTok. I'm not saying I spend time on TikTok, but I probably have now mentioned it enough times that clearly I spend some time on TikTok because I'm fascinated by what people are doing and how they're getting the word out. There is a doctor who, an ER doctor who posts a lot of stuff, and by the way, I won't give his name out here, but his content is not for children. It's not not safe for work, because he's like straight at it. He calls people, names because like, don't be stupid, do this. Very clear in his communication about the medical profession. Very clear about the responsibilities between doctors and patients. Really like on the mark, right pointed. Very much reminds me so much of a Gary V in the medical field that I'm like, dude, I wish that guy was my doctor. Mm-hmm. Very long story to say, like I agree with you 100%, Sean. I think if people and by the way, we should look at these lawyers and financial planners and doctors and fitness gurus and our spiritual leaders as people that we seek out and interview in some form or fashion to be part of our lives, to help us grow.
People first. Remember that they're people. Some people that have a limited amount of education, or maybe from a cultural standpoint, are taught to think that, and let's call it what it is. It's somebody with a title, and somebody maybe of a certain race and a title, like they just know and they're smarter than me or whatever. But you know what? At the end of the day, they're going to bleed just like you if they get hit. They don't have the answer to everything. And they may be great in one area, but not in another. And, you take at face value what they have to offer. And your ability to do that is, to truly do it and get the most value is going to be dictated by the quality and the quantity of the questions that you ask both them and yourself.
I 100% agree. And here's what I love about what's what we're going to see now. So the great thing about human nature is in some way it's somewhat predictable, right? Mm-hmm. When we had the mortgage crisis happen and there was mayhem, the amount of people who filed to get their real estate license after the fact skyrocketed, right? Really.
Yes.
By the way, same with mortgage professionals, skyrocketed. Whenever we see something after the OJ trial, for those of you who remember the OJ trial, law school applications skyrocketed. I think that what's going to happen now, pandemic, I think we're going to see the same thing with medical school applications and medical school people who want to enter the medical profession because they see people suffering and they see a shortfall in how things are being transmitted. So they're called forth to practice medicine and make a difference and make a contribution to the world. I think we're going to see some innovation in the medical field across the globe that we've never seen before, because in 1918, when we had the Spanish flu, we just didn't have the technological capabilities, although massive advancements in the medical field right after that flu. Now that we've got access to information and science has evolved and everything, I think we're going to see a massive explosion in, as Sean is saying, epidemiologists, it's always a hard word for me, will probably skyrocket too. I think 100% we're going to find a lot more people who are curious to know how these epidemics launch and grow and how do we stop them in the future. Financial crisis is coming as well. And people need to understand this too. There's more debt in the United States than we've ever had before, the servicing of that debt. And we just spent the last 18 months printing as much money as we possibly can, cranking out all this cash. And so we're about to have a financial crisis that we've never seen before. There's going to be a need for folks that service the financial services industry. Thankfully, you and I are already in that industry. I see that's a great future growth opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years. And people are going to want to do that because they're going to want to make sure that their families are protected, that they've got something in place so that when they're out of work because of a pandemic for 18 months, they're not waiting for the government to provide them support, and they're not looking for a stimulus check, and they have a way of surviving and thriving even during tough economic times. So sort of my last point of it. Oh, hey, Teresa. Great to see you. Artificial intelligence will disrupt, right? I totally agree, by the way. Artificial intelligence is coming as well. And by the way, there's always good and bad on both sides because innovation occurs in an industry and, there's a way that things are done, and then people devise ways of working around those things as well. So, the good and the bad comes with the good and the bad. And so, our ability to sort of adjust and understand the morality of all of this is key and critical. But I think definitely the financial services industry, I think the legal profession, I think that the real estate market is about to have a massive implosion as well, because we've reached a bubble and we've reached massive growth and ridiculous pricing. And I think the medical field is going to explode as well, all to the betterment of our society as a whole. So all that to say, like, this conversation around medication and vaccination is not one for just a 1 hour topic. We can talk about this for 10 hours. And I think we probably, the next time that we don't have a guest, let's do a part 2 to this, Sean, because we'll do that. I did most of the talking today, which is crazy. I'm telling you, it's the coffee talking. Again, it's a medication, right? So I've medicated my body to be on hyper talking. But no more coffee for you. Your personal situation and how you look at this. And by the way, I think it's so impactful for families who are dealing with children on the autism spectrum to think about what are the things that I need to take into consideration. We've covered a little bit of that today. What are the things that I need to take into consideration? Is this the right thing to do? And am I making the right decision for my family? Let me take all that information in, process all that information, and then make a decision that I believe is the right thing for me to do for my family. If we start there, that's a good place to start, and not make anybody wrong for making the decisions that they make, right?
Most definitely.
It's not a scarcity world. We are in a world of abundance, and we have to remember that. We're in a world of abundance, and there's not either or. It's and more. That's the difference. So that's the thing I think we should keep in mind as we kind of wrap up today's conversation. Today was Brian Altunian rambling with his friend Sean, who occasionally would throw in a few comments here. That was what today's Brian Altunian on caffeine. That's what we're going to retitle the show. It says medication and vaccination. We're going to be how caffeine impacts podcasts around the world. Anyways. I love you all. Thank you all for being a part of our conversation. We had a bunch of viewers on. We had a bunch of folks contributing. Thank you, Teresa. That was awesome to see you. We definitely have to have a conversation. Sean Hall, as always, first of all, happy anniversary. Thank you for your support, as always. We love you tremendously and are so grateful to have you part of our program and part of what we do. And Joe Quinones, my daughter, I love you dearly. And anybody else who's I saw Joey Martin's on there. Caffeinated Brian and Silent Sean. That's what we're going to call it. Joey Martin's, who we've had as a guest recently on our show, and the folks that have contributed, thank you so much for your comments. If you're catching us on Facebook Live, great to see you. Always comment. We always love to see your name. Sometimes we'll post the comments up. Today it was Brian rambling, so we didn't really have time to do that. But subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Put comments on the YouTube channel. We'd love to see you. If you're listening to us on podcasts, we hope that you'll listen to us regularly. Maybe hopefully we add at least talking points today, and let's add some value. Because today, I always say more than ever, empathy and love is always required, is always necessary, and more than ever now, says we become more polarized. We need to realize that we are human. We're in the human race first, and we're in human discussions, and we're evolving constantly, and our opinions evolve with time as well. So be kind to one another. I hate to use that expression; it's overused, but really, empathy and love is really the key. And for the families, our families listening down in the U.S. Virgin Islands on WSTX radio, we love you so much. We're hoping that we're going to get to do a live show with you at one point here, so we can actually get live feedback and live content going. And last thing I'm going to say, just want to say this: Just Two Dads is going to have a release on an empowered media channel that we are launching this fall, and it's going to be kind of cool. We're one of the anchor podcasts that we're going to have a good spot on Empower Media Communications. It'll be more announcements coming later, but we're gonna have some larger reach here as well. So we hope to engage more people in the conversation, and we're grateful to all of you for being a part of this. Sean Francis, I'm grateful to you for your partnership and your friendship and everything that we do together in life, my friend. Is really so meaningful. My life has become much more meaningful as we've been going through this exercise. We're almost on our 52nd episode, which means we're almost a full year into this journey together, and I'm grateful to you for all of that.
As am I. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. I want to encourage everybody. We talked about having the importance of having a team. We like to say that there's no such thing as special needs. Everyone has the same need. Everyone needs to know that they're heard. Everyone needs to know that they're seen, that they're loved, that they matter, right? Everybody has the same need. But if you have a disability or a diagnosis or a caregiver or a parent to someone with a situation like that, you may need more of the basic needs that everyone has. And we just talked about having a team that is able to help you in those areas of life with your fitness, your faith, your finance. Well, we host financial awareness events from time to time. And the next one that we're hosting, we're going to encourage you to save the dates of September 17th and the 18th. It's a 2-day event. We're going to close the event out with the manner in which we help build a bridge between the life that people have and that people want through financial service, education, and opportunity. But we're also going to have people that are experts in other areas of estate planning, IEP preparation, nutrition, therapy, where we have some guests that have a business that is about to launch, where they will have a major database and website that will list services of almost any and every kind for families that have members with special needs. And so that event is going to be taking place, as we mentioned, on September 17th and 18th. Save the date. We'll have the link for you to register for the event because it'll be virtual, so you can attend no matter where you are. And again, as you mentioned, remember that people need to know that they matter and need to know that they are loved, and that somebody someplace needs to know that you care. And I want to close out, as I always do, by making sure that I thank the women in my life without whom I could never attempt to even be who I hope to be and want to be. And that is my mom, Jan, and my wife, Laura. And again, I want to thank Sean Hall, our producer in Hawaii, who just does a fantastic job. And I'm looking forward to the graphics that he's going to put together for the flyer that we're going to have for the event in September and everything. Thank you, everyone. If you're listening, we love you.
We love you. We love you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being a part of this. See you again soon.